grew up in the license permit, Raj, when all the big business groups are garnering licenses and busy preventing each other from, from fostering competition, right? David describes a very different kind of business group, and the Tatas have always been different. But when you look at the Birlas, you look at the Ambanis, you look at all the other business groups there, even the new ones, the Suzlons, the Piramals, and so on and so forth, do you believe that they've all changed, cast a new leaf, created, holding companies which are much more professional, gotten rid of the old family business kind of culture, created holding companies, allowed the professionals to run the operating companies, and that they're thinking globally?
I'm not convinced they have. I mean, we all know how the Ambanis solve their business problems. When the two Ambani brothers have a problem, they go to mother. Now, that is a very good form of corporate governance, and and surely that should be applied universally. Now, but it's not applied universally. And I think one of the things that you cannot divorce India from is that while India is the world's greatest democracy and deserves credit for industrializing against a background of a full-fledged democracy, which no other country has ever done, that's a great experiment. But nevertheless, within that democracy, it's sort of family, the Gandhi family is right. Still owns the Congress party. If you look at the other parties, there's a family link. And one of the aspects, and you mentioned the Tatas being owned by a charitable trust, but one of the aspects of many Indian companies is actually the controlling family owns a very small percentage of the shares. Right. The shares are divested into all sorts of institutions, and yet the family, even within the Tatas, until recently, Ratan Tata was a member of the family who could trace his ancestry back to the man who set up the great steel plant. So, if you like, bringing in fresh people is still, I think, a bit of a difficult concept that Indian companies generally find. And right. Bringing in, if you like, they bring in professional people, but giving them real responsibility and real authority is a developing art, if you like.
Do you believe that stock exchanges have a role to play in promoting long-termism?
Absolutely. I mean, again, as I said today, you watch TV, and I think 3 hours is a long term, right? In investments. So for me, day before yesterday, I was speaking, and I said, in 1979, if you had invested 100 rupees in Indian stock exchange called BSE, today you would have got 20,000% return in 34 years. 20,000%. And that is the kind of growth that has happened. That is the kind of growth that is going to happen given the demographics and so on and so forth. And so for me, there is no alternative but to be long-term anywhere in business. If you want to sort of burn and run, it's just not going to be not going to give you any returns in the long run. And somewhere, I think, on his point, see, there is a great debate, although we may not have heard the second side of the story. It's basically, why do you have to pay hundreds of millions of dollars of salaries to professional managers to align their personal interest with the company's interest? We don't do it in democracy. We don't give leaders billions of dollars of salaries. But in corporate democracy, you have owners and you have managers. And managers are basically people who are taking decisions on behalf of the shareholders who are owners. But if you don't align their interest, then they can actually take decisions which can go haywire. And in Indian framework, there is this what I call owner-manager concept, which has kind of gone away in especially Anglo-Saxon corporate culture, as I would call it. But in India, if a manager has a stake, which is called what we call owner-manager or promoter, then his interests are aligned with the company's interest. And that's why, for me, sometimes when we read only English books written by English people, or at least people from America, we think that is only philosophy in the world, and that is only corporate governance framework. For me, I don't believe that there is only one way to lead life, right?
No, but there's a question of transparency. But there's another aspect of talking about Indian businesses, that what has happened in the West with Reagan in America, with Thatcher, that there was a if you like, examination of whether the state intervention right. in businesses was good. In India, despite the opening up of the economy, there's been no intellectual debate. The constitution says India's goal is to be a sovereign socialist republic. That was when the amendment Mrs. Gandhi put through. That amendment has never been removed. There's still a planning commission. And among what may be called the Indian chattering classes, the old Nehruvian ideas that the state is good and the state should do things has never gone away. There's never been the sort of intellectual argument that we had in America in the 70s and 80s, and that's still going on. And we've had in Britain, with Thatcherism, that, statism is not a good thing. There's never been that intellectual argument in India. India still awaits, if you like, that intellectual argument, because that has an impact on how the world in general, how Indian people look at business.